Hi everyone. In this section, we're going to talk about the setup of a country, history, geography, demographics, and beyond. So it covers especially chapter 3 in your book, History and Geography, the Foundations of Culture. So here are some of the big ideas and objectives for this chapter, especially. So first of all, culture matters. And this is something that the book explores that from different angles for chapters 3 to 7, in fact. So you'll want to practice describing what constitutes a group's culture and to defend why a decision maker may need to know about different cultures. Number 2, another big idea, culture is shaped by different factors. It doesn't just spring from our heads, it comes from somewhere. So it's helpful to be able to practice drawing out how a factor might shape culture. And as we'll see later, how those culture will feed into how we later do things, different factors. And so it ultimately boils down to this. The setup of a country, such as its history, geography, and demographics, guides and makes possible how people and a society lives. So we will find it helpful to learn a few examples of what historic, geographic, and demographic factors could mean, and to learn a few ways these factors can impact culture and our business and marketing plans. So again, the big idea is we're learning a lot of these factors because they ultimately shape culture, and this ultimately guides, so these setup and these factors ultimately guide and make possible how people's society lives via that culture. So here are a few numbers just to kind of consider what we mean by the setup and what these numbers tend to reflect. So here are a few numbers to consider the ways we cluster people in areas. So for example, Shanghai City, China, 27.06 million. Australia, 25.5 million people. Colorado, USA, 5.8 million. Los Angeles City, 4 million. Its metro area is 12.45 million. And let's not even include the greater Los Angeles area, 18.79 million, as they call it, the metropolitan statistical area. And if you look it up, you'll notice that it may not be what we always envision. Belgium, all of Belgium is 11.46 million. And then, as you can think about, this is just the sheer number of people. We also, complicating that is, what about density? What about space or something in between? So the surface area of Russia is close to that of Pluto, where there are over 17.5 million square kilometers and approximately 6.6 million square miles. So basically they're pretty close. Meanwhile, the area of Iowa and Bangladesh are both around 56,977 square miles. And then here again, populations. While we have the population Iowa is 3.17 million, all of Bangladesh is 165 million, and Russia 145.9 million. So you can see that it's important to consider the sheer density of people, space, or something in between, and envision what will that mean for how we approach what we want to do with this group of people. So you can see also with the example again of LA, what does it mean to be LA as a city, the greater LA area, and how we cluster those categories. So here are your learning objectives from the book. Notice how they give you more general principles, but use contemporary examples in history to demonstrate that at work. So, big idea for this and the next bunch of chapters is culture. This is society's accepted basis for responding to external and internal events. So, rule of thumb, something that's learned and passed on by social means. And if it's something that's learned and passed on by social means, it's probably culture. So what is culture? 5 things to remember. It's 1, it's a complex whole that includes knowledge, belief, art, laws, morals, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired, learned by humans as members of society. So again, big thing is, rule of thumb, It's something you learn from others. It's like cultural. So culture is by the lens affected by which we give the world meaning. It's how we use and what we see, touch, and feel. It guides our priorities. So we have things that would come into our senses, but we use culture to understand what they mean. Culture is lived. It's not just something we have. It impacts us because it's actually guiding what we actually think and do. Culture is also dynamic. It changes. That'll be a major theme you'll see in our chapter 3, in fact. But sometimes we often kind of act like culture is just some kind of like solid, this. But even cultures that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years is still happening. Finally, culture is a two-way street, where just as it impacts us, we impact it through our thoughts and deeds too. So again, not only is culture dynamic where it changes, what it does is as much as it affects us, we affect it too. So key takeaway, if it's something you learn from others, it's likely cultural. So culture is not something that's just cultural, or rather national boundaries. It's more than national boundaries. Culture is based on many types of affiliation. So just consider, for example, regional culture alone, how you are likely different based on growing up in whatever region you are. So for a lot of us here, a particular part of Southern California, or wherever, whenever, or however you may have grown up and continue to live. Someone who has traveled and has lived in many different places, that will be a different type and way that they may be part of cultures and have their own culture as well. So let's do a little example. What animal is this? Elk or moose? So the right answer will depend on where you're from. So Norway, Russia, etc., their elk or Eurasian elk are what we might call a moose. For Europeans visiting the Americas, elk had become a stand-in for the word for any big deer, not to be confused with stag, which is their red deer. And although there were European moose, they used the words used by local Native American populations instead, so moose from the Algonquin word. And so what we see here is that what is the right word is deeply embedded in terms of people and languages and other types of effects. It's not just this word happen. So that brings us to our related item about, of course they're wrong, about how one of the biggest trials to international marketing is often breaking out of that system of what is or should be. So here's from Seth Godin, where it seems like our take on culture is that we're right. We shake hands properly, use a napkin properly, speak up at events properly, and even greet one another on the street properly. When I'm in a foreign city, I'm always amazed at how friendly, /off-putting, /aloof, /intimate everyone else is. But of course, everyone else is right as well. They're the home team, so they're even more right than I am. The conflict seems pretty obvious. We can't all be wrong, which means we can't all be right either. So just something to consider as we go. So in the next couple sections, we'll talk a bit about history, geography, and demographics, and how it's not as easy as just saying facts are facts, but instead understanding the context and how we represent and set up and use these conditions matters a whole lot.